frontier. Yes.
Claire, why didn't you resign earlier? Because you were obviously against the war. If you'd have resigned, say, at the same time as Robin Cook, you might have forced the crack in the dam and maybe this whole mess could have been avoided. And on Melanie's assumption...
One point at a time. Let Claire answer that.
And I've answered it before, Shilcott, many, many times. I booked my slot to resign. Tony Blair then has me in and says, what would change your mind? I said, we need a second resolution from the UN. We need to settle Palestine and get the Palestinian state. That's the core problem in the Middle East. And if we do that, you could get everyone in the Arab world to cooperate in dealing with the problem of Saddam Hussein. And by then, there'd been this roadmap negotiated, which was meant to lead to a Palestinian state by 2005. And thirdly, if the war's unstoppable, we need clear agreement that the UN will lead after the war. So we'll get a government that's accepted internationally and people will help to rebuild Iraq. He then got me in again and said Bush has promised to go with the roadmap. At that stage I thought if the President of the US and the Prime Minister of Britain said something as serious as that, it was true. I now know that was naive. And then he had me in again and said President Bush has promised that the UN will lead. So I was in a terrible dilemma and I thought we can't stop the war. The Tories were voting with the government. It was going to pass. If these two things were done, the Middle East would be very different. I thought at that stage that Tony Blair was sincere. I took a lot of flack for it. I still think it was the right thing to do if he'd meant it, because we could have retrieved the mess that we now have.
So you were naive to believe him, is what you're saying?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, that we should be attacked on 9/11 because we're in Saudi Arabia when we're there to protect the people in Iraq is nonsense.
And General Musharraf, did Osama bin Laden, who of course was killed by the US Navy SEALs in May in Abbottabad in Pakistan, did he go to Pakistan after you left office?
Well, I can't be sure. I wasn't tracking him, certainly. But he was there in Abbottabad. As far as I'm concerned, whenever anyone asked me where he is, I always said, I don't know. He could be anywhere.
He used to say he's not in Pakistan. He's probably more likely on the Pakistan-Afghan border inside Afghanistan.
When somebody insisted that he's in Pakistan, then I used to say, what is the information? Where did you get this information from? He could be anywhere. He could be in Afghanistan or even outside Afghanistan. So that was what I used to say.
Were you surprised when he was found in Abbottabad?
Yes, indeed, absolutely. I was shocked that he was in Abbottabad.
I mean, living quite openly in a city just a few miles from an
No, not very openly. Not very openly. He was locked up in a room.
It was a big house, wasn't it, in an urban area? It wasn't a remote farm.
Sorry?
He wasn't living in a remote farm. It was quite a big townhouse he was living in, quite conspicuous.
The best place, the safest place is in a thickly populated place. This is a town. All tourists into the mountains of Pakistan go through Abbottabad, a population of 600,000 people. And there are civilian and military people all mixed and stay together.
But, President, at least you better recognize that he was benefiting, bin Laden, of some complicity. This is impossible to believe that he was isolated, close to the barracks and close to the army and etc. So I understand your answer, but honestly...
I certainly would like to react to this. I mean, after all, slippages or poor performance by the intelligence are possible. If we reflect back to 9/11, how is it that 18 people were being trained for months and CIA was asleep? Yeah. The most powerful organization? How was it that 4 aircrafts, 4 airliners are being hijacked from 4 different airfields and a CIA doesn't know? How is it that 3 of them go into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, CIA is asleep? So let us allow ISI to have been sleeping once at least.
Conversations to, or summaries of the conversations to the CIA without ever telling anybody that they were in the United States. And they were in the United States for almost 2 years. Al-Hazmi was there from January 2000 to September 2001. And again, they're communicating back and forth. NSA's picking up, but not telling anybody that they're in the U.S.
Explain, Jim
got so bad.
Bamford, you say that they set up their final base of operations almost next door to the NSA headquarters in Laurel, Maryland?
Well, that's the ultimate irony, was they eventually traveled cross-country from San Diego, and they set up their final base of operations. This is the crew that was about to attack the Pentagon. About a month before, they set up their base of operations in Laurel, Maryland, of all places. That happens to be the same city that NSA is headquartered. So they set up their base of operations in this Valencia motel. And almost across the Baltimore-Washington Parkway is NSA headquarters. The director's office is on the 8th floor, and except for some trees, he could almost see the motel where they're staying. So NSA is over there trying to find terrorists, and here's the 9/11 terrorists sitting right opposite the NSA on the other side of the Parkway, making their final plans. Mohammed Atta flew there for summit meetings, and they had to take 3 hotels at one point to put all the people there. So as NSA is looking for them, they're having their final summit meetings there, and they're walking around the Safeway. They're exercising in Gold's Gym. They're eating in the restaurants there. They're mingling with NSA employees. That's NSA's company town. It's just the ultimate irony that here you have the terrorists and the eavesdroppers living side by side in the month before the final attack.
You then say, after the attacks, the White House expanded massively surveillance, turning it inward on Americans right here. Can you talk about how they did it?
Well, first of all, looking back on the pre-attack, it was clear right after the attack that General Hayden, the director of NSA, realized the big mistake he had made, that these guys not only were in the U.S., and he never told anybody, they were communicating from the other side of the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, and he never let anybody know. So.
Now that nearly all of us are online, connected or digital in some way, spies are no longer watching just 1 or 2 bad guys. Instead, the UK and US governments are both collecting massive amounts of information from the things we do on our phones and over the internet. There are 2 main ways they get hold of this information. One way is working with the companies that run these systems and tap the cables that are vital for moving all this information around. They can then sift through the huge amount of data they gather and all the messages that are there and store them in massive computer databases.